Welcome to the Music Ed Matters podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Emily Williams Birch, and this podcast, it exists for you. Whether you're a music lover, an educator, a choir member, each week we bring guests to the show to help explore what matters in music. I'm so glad that you're here. Welcome to the show. Hello, and welcome to the Music Ed Matters podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Emily Williams Birch, and today you are going to hear from a Broadway producer. How cool is that? You're like, why, Emmy? Well, because I think there are so many jobs developing out there that you either do or don't know about. And if you are in the music education world, you need to know what you're preparing your students for. It's not just teaching. It's not just performing. What all is possible with a passion and a love for music. So I'm very excited to introduce you to Cristina Vivenzio. She is one of my neighbors here in Savannah, but also produces shows up in New York on Broadway. And we talk about the entire process of going from idea to Broadway show for the new upcoming musical, The Outsiders, which I'm so excited about. Anyway, I'm really excited to ask some of the questions I've always wanted to know. And I also am recording this episode because I'm teaching singing for the actor this quarter, and I wanted to know how to help the students best prepare for auditions, for the process, and for all the things other than just being on stage that they could be a part of. So now you know the why, you know who you're talking to, and you need to know that the show is brought to you by our friends at Perform International. You want to go see a Broadway show? They can make that happen, along with so many other great stops along the way and performances. So check out performinternational.com. And you could totally go to the West End too. I didn't even think of that. You want to go to the West End? We should all go to the West End. Okay, that's enough. I'm so excited for you to hear from my friend Cristina as we talk about how to produce a Broadway musical such as The Outsiders. Today, we are talking to a Broadway producer and my newest neighbor. So excited about that. Cristina Vivenzio. Hello, my friend.
Hi, Emmy. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being on the show. And right before previews, I feel so spoiled that you were giving me some of your time before you go into previews.
Oh my gosh.
So cool. I'm really pumped for the listeners to get to know you. And we have so many cool things to talk about. I'm dying to know your story, though. I know a snippet, but you need to tell the listeners. Who is Cristina, and how did you become who you are today?
Oh my gosh, you are very kind and very flattering. I got to where I am today, as many people say, because of their parents. Because growing up, my parents always loved Broadway, and I grew up in New Jersey, so about an hour outside of the city. So my parents would take me all the time, even when I was very, very young. And my mother loves to tell me that she would get dirty looks from people because they were bringing a young girl into the theater, and I would just be mesmerized and just stare at the stage and don't say a peep, didn't move. So that was really how my entry point into falling in love with musical theater and the Broadway. And then I started to get involved in youth theater, like community theater, youth theater programs as an actor when I was younger, because I really didn't know any other way to be involved in the industry. And then I went to college for also performing. I went to NYU, Tisch School of the Arts. And then when I graduated, I realized I don't want to be an actor, but I want to work on Broadway. And I didn't have any tools to do that other than immersing myself in any opportunity I could. So I took internships, which the first internship I took was a internship in the agency side of things, in a big talent agency. And I realized that's not what I want to do. And then I took an internship at a booking agency that books the Broadway national tours across the country, which I also I learned so much. I was like, that's what I want to do. And then that internship led to my first job as a receptionist at a new advertising agency at the time, which is now they are one of the top advertising agencies in the industry. But at the time they were just starting out. They had just come over from London. And I quickly moved into an executive assistant position working for the managing partners. And I learned so much doing that. It was like a college education in itself. And that was where I was really able to zero in and say, oh, I want to produce. Producing is where my skill set is. It's where my passion is. And then I worked myself over to sort of that side of things. And I started assisting. I started assisting the over at National Artists Management Company, which at the time they were producing the revival of Pippin, which was really exciting because that show was very important to me. It was a show I acted in high school that I loved so much. So getting to work on the Broadway revival was really exciting. And then from there, I went over to Jujamcyn Theaters, which is one of the theater owners. They own 5 Broadway houses. They've actually now merged with one of the other theater owners. So they technically don't even exist anymore, which is sad to comprehend. But I worked there for 5 years and learned so much, both on their creative operations side of things, and then also working with the president of Jujamcyn Theaters. And from there, it took me over to the company that I am in now. So I've been very fortunate to have amazing mentors and teachers throughout my career because I did not go to college for this. So I a little bit come from the School of Hard Knocks. But that's the long story short of how I ended up on the producing side of things.
I love that you just kept trying until you found the thing, like, performing's not my thing. Let's try this. And then once you found your thing, it's like you're thriving. I have a question. So
Sure.
I went and saw the Taylor Swift Eras film. There was a screening at school last week in our theater. And the colorist for the film came on beforehand and said, you probably don't know what that means to be a colorist. It's basically I am the Instagram filter for every part of this film. So it made it very understandable what this person did in the film. So can you explain exactly what a producer does?
No, I can't.
I Googled this and did not get any better at explaining what a producer does.
I mean, the word producer is defined very differently amongst the film and TV world, amongst even in the theater world. You hear terms such as executive producers and co-producers and lead producers, and it's thrown around quite a lot. I work currently for a company called the Araca Group, and we are the lead producers of an upcoming musical called The Outsiders. And the way we operate, which again is not the way I would say all lead producers operate on their shows. I mean, every show is its own organism and entity and have its own methodology. But we really have our hands on a little bit of everything that the show involves, from the capitalization to the marketing and advertising to the creative development to the casting. There really isn't a piece of the show that we do not have our hands on in some way, but which is sort of why my story of how I ended up doing this was so valuable, because I did experience all different aspects of the industry that has now given me a breadth of knowledge as I'm interacting with all of them, because that's what producers do. I interned at a talent agency and I deal with talent agencies every day now, so there's a lot I learned being on the other side of things that I think has truly informed how I produce.
Is there a team just with the Outsiders? So you say you work for this agency. So there's a team of you every day showing up to make sure this is functioning, like cast direct, you're like almost directing the cruise ship in a way.
Truly, that's
a cruise ship.
That is a perfect way of describing it. And it's interesting because we've worked on this for a long time. I've worked on this show now for 5 years since I joined the company. And, when the show is in development, it's much smaller, right? And as we get closer to Broadway, which now we are entering that phase of it, it is constantly mind-boggling how many people are working on this cruise ship now.
Okay. So we
but
went
on
from
my
like
company,
a yacht to a massive, epic Virgin cruise liner.
Epic, yes.
Okay.
But my company, specifically the way the Araca Group operates, actually 90% of my company is a merchandising company, and they do merch for Broadway shows, television, film, musicians, runs the gamut. Me and my 2 bosses are the producing side of the company. So it is literally the 3 of us. who handle the producing of it all. The Araca Group is actually run by three partners of two brothers and a childhood best friend of theirs. So one of the brothers runs the merchandising side, the other runs the producing side, and then the third is also involved in the producing side, but then also handles some of the sort of the finance and HR side of things as well. So they divide and conquer. But for the outsiders, because it's such a special project for us, all three are involved in different ways. So,
oh, you're going to need all three of those things. Okay. I am so excited to ask this question because I've always wanted to know. Because, like you, I grew up going to see musicals with my family. And I remember, what was the first one you saw? Do you remember?
I think the first one I ever saw was Song and Dance with Bernadette Peters. But I always say that my why musical, the musical that I saw and I was like, I have to work on Broadway, was Tommy.
Oh, so good.
Yeah.
All the cheese on the planet. I knew I had to be in music after Phantom of the Opera.
I mean, of course.
I just was done. We
course.
had third row seats. The chandelier fell on top of us. I was in a fancy red sparkly dress. I mean, every childhood fantasy come true. That was the musical for me. And I remember that we saw lots of other ones, but I compared everything to that one.
Yes. I mean, I saw a lot growing up. I saw some amazing things like Patti LuPone and Anything Goes and Cheetah Rivera and Kiss of the Spider Woman. I remember City of Angels. Like there's some I remember so clearly. Some I was so young that I vaguely remember. But Tommy was definitely.
Like I remember there were cat costumes, but
I remember there were cat costumes. I remember being in the theater, but it definitely wasn't. Yeah. But I remember with Tommy, it was me and my mom, my dad, and we had gotten tickets. The St. James is such a big theater. I think we had tickets like up in the balcony, and there was just a crying child next to us, screaming, crying. So I remember my father went to the usher and like must have tipped him like $20 and was like, "Is there anywhere else we could sit?" And I remember the usher brought us to the box in the St. James, and we had these awesome seats. And I just remember seeing that show, and I loved it so much. That music was so incredible. And then full circle, when I worked at Jujamcyn Theaters, our offices were above the St. James Theater. So I was like, I always remembered walking into there, that moment with my parents.
So
and
full circle.
then my office being above it. Yeah, yeah.
Sorry, I got off topic. It's just so much fun to talk about something that has been such an important part of life, but I chose a more classical training pathway and have always worked in these very typical training institutions. And so now being at SCAD, where it is just embrace the creativity and go whatever direction we need to go to help these students not just figure out their creative ideas, but their creative careers. It's more than just a job. It's a whole experience for your life.
I love that so much.
It's been so much fun. My creativity has exploded since starting there, just because I'm able to tap into this piece of me that I'd kind of put on a shelf.
Yeah.
But I want to go back to the question. Sorry to get on a tangent.
Well, no, but we can keep going on tangent and then we'll go back to the question. But I think what you're saying is so important because even like your colorist example, there are just so many facets of creativity and artistry. And there's not just that. I mean, that's what I learned growing up. And I love how now SCAD and so many other universities have more opportunities to learn about other parts of these industries rather than when I was growing up, I thought the only way I could do it was be an actor. That's the only way you could be in theater. So I became an actor. Exactly. And now they have business of theater majors. They have music, so it is, I love hearing young people telling me that they're majoring in all different facets of the industry, which is so exciting.
Producing, directing, casting. We have minors in casting.
I love that. I love that so much.
First day with casting students in class, they were casting something, and me and my idiot mouth the next day was like, "Did you get it casted?" And one of them was like, "That's not a word." I'm like, "Cool, thanks."
But it's also how you learn, right? Is being immersed in all these sides of the industry and people that work in them. So I think that's so fantastic. Yay, SCAD. Love that so much.
I'm so happy. But it's also cool too, like for educators or people who love music that are listening, that there used to only be perform or not perform.
Right,
or
right.
Be a manager or don't. There weren't a lot of options, and the options are just exploding right now. So whether you're teaching fourth graders or 11th graders or college students, or you're just appreciating music, there's so many ways in which you can do that now.
Absolutely.
And that's okay. I'm dying to know this answer now. This has been my number one question.
Okay.
You said you've been working on The Outsiders for 4 or 5 years.
Yep.
And I read the book right after I met you. Such a good book. I'm not watching the movie. I'm waiting for the musical because I would like to go out of order, please. How do you get from this book is good to it's going to become a musical? And how does it go from an idea to off Broadway to Broadway? What does this process look like?
Well, that's not an easy question to answer because there's not one answer to it. I could tell you this specific example
Tell
of
us this one and
how,
then we'll,
because each show has really its own journey, its own path, its own life.
That's so cool.
For us, so before I was even at Araca, a gentleman named Fred Roos, who is a casting director for many of Francis Ford Coppola's movies, specifically The Outsiders. He actually came up with the idea of turning that property into a musical. And again, I wasn't with my company at the time, so this is the story as I understand it, but that he had reached out to a couple different Broadway producers and sort of pitched the idea. And he came to my company and they were like, that's actually kind of a great idea. But, the one question we always get is like, how do you translate The Outsiders to the stage? And the easiest answer I have is when people hear what it sounds like. So Fred pitched the idea. You then go into years of legal negotiations back and forth to obtain the rights. But at the same time, as I was mentioning, our company has a merchandising side of the company. We were doing the merch for a band called Jamestown Revival. And they are a super cool Americana rock folk type of band. You should listen to them, Jamestown Revival. They're awesome. And they heard that we were working on developing The Outsiders as a musical, and they had never written a musical before. And they said, we want to pitch ourselves to write the music for the show.
And they've never written one before, ever.
They'd never written a musical before. They'd probably only seen like a handful of musicals. But their music is amazing. Again, listen to Jamestown Revival. They're so great. They're such poetic, beautiful songwriters. But anyway, so they basically wrote a couple songs for the show and pitched it to my bosses. And it's the first song they played sounded like their version of Broadway. My bosses were like, don't write Broadway, write you guys. And then they came back and they wrote the song Stagel, which is still in the show today. So once you hear kind of their style and their sound, it sort of fills in the blanks of like, how do you translate The Outsiders to the stage? So after you get the rights to develop the show, you then start to put the creative team together. That was the story of how we gained two of our three composers. We paired them originally with Justin Levine, who first came onto the project as a music supervisor, arranger, and orchestrator. He had just finished doing Moulin Rouge, which was wizardry. And he won a Tony for it. He's incredible. And as the three of those guys started working together, the two from Jamestown Revival were like, he's a composer with us. Like, he's not just our supervisor, arranger, orchestrator. So he is now a composer. So we have three composers. And then we brought on Adam Rapp as the book writer. This is also Adam's first musical, which is really exciting as well. And then once you sort of have your creative team in place, you start writing drafts of the show while raising some money to do that, to pay your team to write the drafts, to put on staged reading with the drafts. And then it just kind of keeps on going from there. When the project started, we had a different director, and over COVID and everything, we parted ways with that director, and we brought on Danya Tamor as our director. Probably like 2 years ago now or so. And it's just been incredible. This creative team is extraordinary. It's been a pleasure watching them develop this piece. Yeah.
This is so, I have lots of questions, but we're going to start with this one.
I'm jumping around too. There's a million other things. Ask questions.
I'm happy. Cool.
Okay.
Okay. So first of all, we've already highlighted some other jobs here. So we took a band that's now writing songs. We have the role of music supervisor, arranger, orchestrator, all of those things. We talk about that in my arranging and transcribing class, how that is a pathway that you can go down. Love that pathway. We don't actually do a Broadway transcription until week 8, but we're getting there. We're still developing our ears at the moment. So anyway,
We
so
also have an amazing musical director on the show too. We have an associate music director. Like there's a lot of music
many
happening.
ways.
There's so many
So
ways.
you're trusting 2 brand new people to Broadway.
Mhm.
How did your team know that they had what it takes to do it?
I don't know if you ever really know, as you have to trust your gut. That's a lot of producing. You know, there's a lot of voices in the room, especially where we are now, where I was saying we have a mega liner cruise ship of people working on this show. And I think you have to trust your gut sometimes. And sometimes you're right, sometimes you're wrong. But I think, again, I wasn't there when they first came onto this project, but they're so right for this show. Their voices are so right for the show, their style, everything. So sometimes you get lucky and magic happens.
That's so that's I can't wait to see it. Like everything
No.
you're saying is making me even more excited. So you bring on this creative team, you have your director. When are you ready to cast? And are you casting? Have you already picked your off-Broadway location? How does that work?
So similar to when I told you kind of during COVID, we had lost our director, we had a different pathway. Right before COVID hit, we were supposed to open out of town at the Goodman Theater in Chicago. We were scheduled to open, I think, my memory serves me, like May. We were supposed to start rehearsals like in a week from before COVID hit. So similarly, you know, to the director shift, we also had to shift our out of town tryout because once the theater reopened, there was such a backlog, they weren't going to be able to get us in to, I think it was not until spring of this year. We're like, we don't want to wait that long. Like we are ready. We have our cast, we have our script. Like we want to do this. We're chomping at the bit. I had just finished working on a musical with Chris Ashley, who is the artistic director over at La Jolla Playhouse. He was the director of Diana the Musical, which we had done before and during COVID. And we called him because La Jolla Playhouse is extraordinary. And we said, look, you know, everything, all the chips are up in the air right now in all these theaters. We don't know if you might have a spot, but we've just kind of lost our spot at the Goodman. Is there any possibility? And again, sometimes you just get lucky. And he literally said to us, like, if you called me yesterday, I didn't have a spot for you. Today, I have a spot for you. So we were able to pivot, and it was just such a glorious gift because the La Jolla Playhouse team is truly the most magnificent people I've ever worked with. It was such an amazing home for us to birth this show. They are all so smart and savvy and supportive, and they really are part of the family that has created The Outsiders. So it was amazing that we got to go there. So we were there March of last year. Is that right? Yes, I think that's right. It's all been together. I think it was March and April of last year. So, and then we were able to take this time to go back to New York. We've done 3 workshops in New York to sort of focus on all of our learnings from our time at La Jolla to get us ready for the Broadway rehearsal process. So
did you pick the cast for La Jolla from the cast you already had for Chicago?
a little bit. So the cast we had for Chicago was with a different director.
Okay.
So when our new director came on, she had a slightly, you know, different vision for the show. So she had invited all of the old cast to come and audition. And out of the old cast, I think it was 3 people who stayed with it, which was, it's hard and challenging, but you know, it is her creative vision up there. We wanted to obviously support that and that exploration. And so, yeah. So it's a mostly different cast than the cast we had for the Goodman.
And these auditions, are they happening in New York? And then you're telling them this is where we're going to go?
Yes, most of the auditions are in New York. Our amazing casting directors cast a very wide net for us because our cast is very young. So he certainly looked all around. I mean, our lead is from Georgia, actually. We have someone else from Florida. We have from all over, someone from Chicago. I mean, from all over the place. But yes, our auditions were held mostly in New York, some via Zoom, which was actually really helpful for our show because we were able to see people from all over the place. So that was really great. But yes, mostly in New York, and then you travel them all. So you do have some local hires from the show that we had out in La Jolla, and they were based in California.
Okay, so it sounds like the net of possibilities is huge when it comes to auditions. So for people listening that are either going to go through the audition process or prepare people for the audition process or eventually go see a show where people auditioned, what are some of the tricks and tips that you would give them based on what you've seen?
Well, I'll tell two things. I'll answer this in two different ways. One, our director's audition process is incredible. I've never seen a director take so much time and care with each actor. I mean, she literally schedules about a half an hour. I mean, these are callbacks, but a minimum of a half hour to go through a significant amount of material because, and I totally understand where she's coming from. You know, you're hiring a performer, but you're also about to work with this person for a really long time. So you want to get to know them. So every time an actor comes in the room, she has them sit down and talks to them first. And you see how nervous that makes some people because they're not used to that in auditions. You know, they're very used to coming in, singing their song, thank you very much, and heading out. And Danya will say, please come sit down, let's talk. Where are you from? What got you into theater? Like, and you see these actors, the nerves start to fade away, and then they're able to give these incredible performances. So it's a really amazing process to watch. You know, I would say my biggest tip is be yourself. Because what you're really looking is for that individuality, that special something that only you can bring into this room. You know, you see a lot of people in a day of auditions, and what really sticks out are the ones that their personality comes through and they're open to whatever direction is given. And I know that's very hard to do because you're so nervous in these auditions. And when you walk in, there's all these people behind the table and it's so nerve-wracking. But I would say the more you can let your own individual person shine through, the more that audition will stick with the people behind the table.
The stickiness of the audition. I love it. And I always tell the students, you're the only you on the whole entire planet. Like, don't
You're the
rob
only
the
you.
world of not having you. You have to be you, not anyone else.
And also, like, everyone's going to sing the song pretty. There's a lot of people who could sing beautifully. There's a lot of people who act great. There's a lot of people who dance incredibly. But what makes you stand out from all of that is just yourself and what you can bring to it.
That's such a good point, too. I mean, everybody can sing beautifully.
Well, not everybody. I can't. But a lot of people can.
Everyone, yes. Yeah, so good. Okay, so you're in this new theater. You're so excited. You said that the people and the employees at that theater really played a role in getting this whole thing put together.
Oh, at La Jolla,
do they
yeah.
help with the building of the set?
Yeah.
What is it that they do that makes it that they're a part of it?
Oh my gosh, everything. The La Jolla production manager, he created that whole show for us. So they basically, yes, they build the show. The artistic director were in creative notes meetings with us. They house the show, the first arrival of it, you know, and a lot of the sets and costumes and props we're still using in the Broadway production. And their audiences taught us so much about the show. And it was so incredible to see because we heard a lot that traditionally the audience members there were of a certain age. And what we saw with our show was really the multi-generational response. You would see the kids coming with the parents, with the grandparents. So the fact that this IP is able to translate to all the different people who perhaps read the book in school, saw the movie when they were younger, and now are experiencing the musical was amazing. So every aspect of that experience informed the show that it is today.
Wow. Okay, I hadn't thought about those aspects of the pre-Broadway. Okay, so you have success. You're really happy with what's happening. You close in April last year. You've had 3 workshops. How did you secure and find your place on Broadway? What does that look
like? So there are 42 Broadway theaters, and within them, there's long-running shows, some that don't house musicals, some that can only be playhouses. So the inventory based on the amount of shows trying to come in is quite limited. So it is always a constant struggle to secure a theater. We are very lucky to be going to the Bernard B. Jacobs Theater, which is the Schubert organization is our landlord. The Schubert organization is also one of our partners in our merchandising business. And they came to see the show in La Jolla. They are also investors in the show, are co-producers in the show, and it is we're very, very excited because the Jacobs is a beautiful jewel box right on 45th Street, and it is the most perfect theater for us. So, but we had to raise the money because they're not going to give you theater if you don't have the money. So we had to raise our capitalization, and keep knocking on their door until they could give us the wonderful news that we were able to get that theater.
So who do you get your capital funds from?
We raised in many non-traditional ways. There's a lot of professional co-producers that work on Broadway, and they raise funds for all different shows. We kind of went some different routes on this one. So we have a really interesting group of co-producers that a lot of them are also the first time investing on Broadway. We have large pools of co-producers that we met out in California, out in La Jolla. We have a large group from Cleveland, Ohio, which is where the three owners of the Araca Group are from. And all different walks of life. So it was a lot. It's a lot of work to raise the money, but we were very fortunate. And doing these workshops, we did private industry presentations with them. So then people who weren't able to see the show in La Jolla are able to see it in New York in a studio. So it was those are kind of some of the routes we took. But we they used to call them dog and pony shows, where you would kind of pitch your show to a group of potential investors, and we kind of did versions of that, but a little cooler than a dog and pony, I would say.
Okay. So then you get your funding, you get your space. Have you lost any of the cast from the original attempt the first year? And do you have to replace those, especially because it is a young cast? It is a child ultimately.
Yeah, we did do some changes from La Jolla, mostly because the script changed a lot. There's one character that we eliminated completely. There's some characters that originally were more singing, comedy, acting focused, and now they're dancer tracks. So that involved a little recasting. Some actors had other shows too. So we lost a couple. We did do some recasting in between La Jolla and now Broadway, but our cast is now set. And you have to cast additional swings and understudies for Broadway, which is a more substantial bench than we had for La Jolla.
Okay, so we have a bench. We have all of our people. we have our date for previews.
Mm-hmm.
So you do previews first, and then opening nights. Almost a month after that.
Our first preview is March 16th, and then we open April 11th.
Okay, so a little bit under. What's the point of preview before opening?
So previews, you are still rehearsing during the day. So you are putting your show in front of an audience. You're getting the feedback the audience is giving. You're seeing what they react to, what they're not reacting to. And you're still tweaking your show throughout the preview process. So it's a very grueling process and very long days. But yeah.
Okay,
and then once you open, you have to freeze the show. I think we freeze on April 5th, which means we can't tweak it anymore, and press starts to come in. So from March 16th through April 5th, you're still tweaking, changing, finishing.
I'm coming pre-April 5th.
You are. You're coming really early.
I am really early. I can't wait. It's the best spring break ever. And then I want to come after it's frozen and see what changed.
We made a ton of changes in La Jolla from previews to opening. Yeah.
This is the coolest.
It's a fun time. But you get your cast. So we start rehearsals February 1st, where we have the cast in the studio for the month, basically. And then you transfer the cast on stage, and you have what's called tech rehearsals, where you're working with the lighting, the sound, costumes, the whole hoopla. And that's a really short period. It's like, let's say 2.5 weeks. It's not very long. So hence the still rehearsing during the day, still adjusting, still changing, still editing, still cutting. We, in La Jolla, we put in like a whole new song in during the preview process. So yeah, things change.
You have sparked, I think, what might be maybe one of my last questions. Maybe. Well,
Okay.
I'm trying not to inundate you with questions.
Go away. Grow.
So I love the single that has dropped, Great Expectations.
Yay!
Listeners, if you have not already, The Outsiders, Great Expectations. Great Expectations. It's so good. It is so good. I used it to teach inversions in my music theory class.
Oh my gosh, I love that it's being taught already.
Yeah,
well, more music is coming out very soon. So.
Oh, it is? Okay. Oh, I'm so excited. It is so good. Who is that song? Like, who wrote that song? Where does it fall? Give us a little snippet of that, please.
Sure. So that song is written by Jamestown Revival and Justin Levine, our composers. That song happens early on. It's kind of what we consider the I Want song, where in a musical you learn what your lead character is desiring. And it's when Pony Boy is falling asleep with next to his brother Soda Pop. And, he's just knowing there's more in life, but he doesn't quite know what that is yet. And he's reading Great Expectations. So this is a moment for him to sort of reflect on his friends and his family and his life, and be striving for more. And Brody Grant sings on that track and has the voice of an angel. So
yes, follow it on the Instagram and you can see
yes,
it in
please.
the studio. It's so good. I showed it to I have a few students that are in middle and high school doing musicals here in town, and I have a few that I coach through auditions or through their roles once they're assigned, just working on those little things, especially as the voice is developing in that 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th grade age range. Anyway, I have a student who came in and I had just started reading the book and it was sitting on top of my coffee table, and immediately was just about how much they loved this book. So I'm like, okay, well, let me play this single that dropped. And as soon as I played it, jaw on the ground, that's every word. Like, they'd memorized the book for some reason. Maybe they just have a photographic memory. Those are the words from the opening. I can't wait to see it. When's it come out? So the next time I saw the student, the mom came in. I was like, when is that musical coming? We have it was so much fun.
That book runs real deep. We have learned a lot about how passionate people are about that book. It's incredible. Susie Hinton, who wrote it, she came to see it in La Jolla.
I was going to say, how has she been involved?
Oh, she has been so generous in letting us develop this. She came out to La Jolla. She spoke to the cast. We're actually going to see her next weekend in Tulsa. She still lives in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And she'll come for opening. And, when we first started developing this, we would send her drafts of the script. And she would say, I don't want to read this. I don't know how to write a musical. You guys do it. So the first time she fully saw the show was in La Jolla, and she came the same night the New York Times came. And I think we were all more nervous about Susie seeing it than the New York Times seeing it. But yeah, she's been absolutely incredible and so generous. At that opening night party, the whole cast was like lined up one by one to get just like time with Susie, and she's amazing. She's a really incredible woman.
Characters are so well done in that.
Totally. And she wrote that when she was 15 years old.
Right? I was just about to say, and she was a kid when she wrote it.
It's crazy. And she'll say things too, like the foresight she had as a 15-year-old is absolutely mind-boggling to me. Because I remember we were once talking about swearing and how the book has no swearing in it. And she said, well, I wanted it to remain timeless. And swearing, it's what's the word I'm looking for? It's very it just dates you. Because swearing, changes in the different generations. So, but I just thought, like, what 15-year-old thinks like that?
Yeah, who thinks in that way?
Yeah.
We were just talking last week. We did a super quick history of musical theater, and we got to like today, and there were 4 main elements we were looking at. Book musicals, obviously, because those are my favorite. But we were also talking about jukebox musicals, and I forget the other 2 at the moment because I'm thinking all about books right now. But it was so fun that all the students went on scavenger hunts to figure out what's coming to Broadway from those 4 categories. And we're the most excited about the book musicals right now.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Do you guys teach this book, Jack Bertel's book, The Secret Life of the American Musical?
That's an amazing book. I don't teach history of musical theater right now. I'm just singing for the actor. But yes, I will put that on my must-add list.
I truly believe this book should be taught in every classroom across the country.
Really?
Jack is
Okay,
a
what's
dear.
the title?
It's called The Secret Life of the American Musical by Jack Vertel, and it's all about how Broadway shows are built
Wow.
and the structure of Broadway show.
Love
Jack
it. Oh my gosh.
is I first met Jack working at Jujamcyn Theaters, and he's a dear friend and mentor of mine. And he is a creative consultant on The Outsiders, actually. It's incredible. But that book, I could not recommend it more. I've reread it so many times. Anytime we're lost in notes or creative development, I always refer back to that book. It's like my Bible.
Yes. Oh, there has to be good books like that. That is so good. Okay, I have added it to my must-read list.
Mm-hmm.
This has been so eye-opening. I know we've only touched like the little bitty edge of the iceberg that is producing a Broadway musical, but I feel like for me as an educator, it's giving me so many ideas for how to shape the students that are coming through my classroom on all the possibilities.
Oh, I love that so much. And again, this is just how we're working on this show. I mean, it's different. Every show is different. Every producer operates differently. There's no one way to do it.
Oh, but isn't that a story of life? There is no
Yeah,
one way to do it.
exactly. Choose your own path,
so
take
good.
your own path, forge your own path.
I love it. Okay, always let the guest say the one thing that really matters, the one thing you want to illuminate. What is the one thing you want the listener to walk away from this with?
Be yourself. If you're a producer, if you're a musician, if you're an actor, just be yourself. Don't lose yourself in the art. Put yourself in.
That is so good. Don't lose yourself in the art. Put yourself in the art.
Totally.
I'm so glad we finally got to have this conversation.
Oh my gosh,
I'm
this is
guessing there's going to be way more conversations in our future. I know you are so busy with previews and opening night, but thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for inviting me. This was such a pleasure, such a delight.
Okay, friends, what did you think? Are you excited to go find your luck, to go try your thing, to bridge your own path? There's only you in the world that is you. Don't rob the world of that opportunity. Know that there's so many ways to get somewhere. I hope that you enjoyed this conversation, that you learned something. It was so fun to explore and illuminate this conversation with Cristina. I hope that you go see The Outsiders. And in case you're wondering, you're really important and all the things you're doing matters. We all know that things like Broadway musical matters and just changes all of the ways we can experience entertainment and tell stories. And I just stinking love music. And I'll see you next time on the Music Ed Matters podcast.